and I use she, her, hers pronouns.
I'm Jonathan, and I use he, him.
Life is filled with deep mysteries. Although we enter this place to come to understand them more fully, it is beyond these walls, in the common things of the everyday, that we most regularly meet them. Starlight, wind, heat waves off the pavement, music in the silence of a smile.
So, while we are here, let us open ourselves to the contemplation of mystery, but let us never confine it to this place. May we delve into it here, but find it everywhere. As followers of the way of Christ, as ones who remain open, as those who walk in mystery, we gather in the Spirit.
As you gather this morning, we invite you to join us in singing Colorful Creator, number 457 in the Chalice Hymnal. If you are in person, we invite you to stand as you are able. If you are joining us online, we invite you to sing loud and strong from your couch, car, or wherever you are. We welcome one another as we join our voices together wherever we are.
Spirit of the truth, midwifing God, we confess our shortcomings. We have let fear guide the way. We have hidden from her courage past us. We have leaned into patterns of comfort and stunted our imaginations, following paths laid out by resignation and cynicism. Lead us to the root of our spiritual frailty, compassionate one. Guide us not with shame, but tenderness. We grieve the faithful ways we cannot be, though we long to be them. Generous, open-hearted, steadfast, courageous. Forgive us. Bloom in us brighter of ways of being, that all beings may flourish. In this life, we point to this moment, burning in our midst to claim the hope leading us onward. May we go with courage.
Our true home is in the present moment. To live in the present moment is a miracle. The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle to appreciate the peace and beauty that are available now. Peace is all around us, in the world and in nature, within us, in our bodies and our spirits. Once we learn to touch this peace, we will be healed and transformed. It is not a matter of faith, it is a matter of practice. May the peace that surpasses all understanding be with you. And also with you. To those online, we invite you to share this ancient greeting in the chat. For all those in the sanctuary, we invite you to turn to the camera and say hello to all worshiping with us in digital space this morning. For those in the sanctuary, you are also invited to share this ancient greeting with those seated near you.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to National Avenue Christian Church. My name is Pastor Jenn. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and it is my delight to get to say welcome. It is so good to be together in the space as spring is bubbling, as green is filling this space. I heard there might be a leprechaun in here. I don't know. Good day to be together. So thank you for being with us online. It is so good to share this time. Thank you for your presence. I appreciate the words of Thich Nhat Hanh that we just heard that remind us our ability to be present is a miracle. So thank you for being present to one another, to the cups of coffee, to the music, to this space, and helping to bring this moment to the fullness of life. I'm going to share a few things about the life of our community and ways that you can connect in relationship beyond this space and time, and some exciting things coming up. Know that you can catch these in the avenues, our weekly communication, find things on Facebook, and you can check in if you'd like to know a little bit more or just share with whom we're worshiping. You can hold your phone up as if you're going to take a picture. It'll take you to a link, and you can share just your name or any additional information that would be helpful. There's also a link if you're with us online that you can share some information there. And again, if you want to leave questions or have anything else, you can leave it there in that space as well. We gather on Tuesdays at Dancing Mule to share coffee and conversation, just a really lovely time where sometimes we dig into really heavy text, sometimes we talk about our favorite books. So it's a lovely time, 10:30 on Tuesdays if you're available and want to join us. Also happy to gather other times if that time is not available to you in your schedule, let me know, and we'll find another time to be gathered at the table together. Today, we will be joining at Tie and Timber at 3 o'clock. This is the final of our series. So we've been talking about John Shelby Spong's book, or at least our Lenten series. We probably will have another conversation beyond Easter, but For this series, this will be an opportunity if you have questions about the book, if you're reading along or just want to say, hey, I've heard some things in worship, come join us. A reminder that Thai and Timber has wonderful beer, but also has kombucha and soda and lots of other offerings and coffee. We'll try to find a cozy, quiet-ish space with a little sunlight, just the perfect spot today. So we'll see what we can do about finding a good spot and hope that you'll come join us if that's yours to do this afternoon. I wanted to share about a really exciting event, our Spring Spark. So this is a space that many other colleagues and I have been talking about and dreaming together, practicing connection and community with a spirit of play. So if you ever wanted to learn how to make those giant bubbles, this is your chance. If you love great music with Ivy, this is your chance. If you've wanted to try really great homemade granola, this is your chance. So this will be a really fun day, Saturday, April 13th from 11 to 2. And again, the whole spirit and energy of this is to come together and play. So there'll be lots of opportunities to do this. Free event. Encourage you just to come out. We are asking for RSVPs and a way you can sign up there. There's more online and you can find out more. Come ask me as you have questions. But just want to make sure it's on your calendars, April 13th for our first Spring Spark event at Phelps Grove Park. As we continue in this season, we will have flowers and music as a way to celebrate. Kirsten, we're so thankful for the beautiful music this morning, getting to have you here. As we have Palm Sunday, next week we'll hear the bells, and then into Easter. So just a reminder that flowers on Easter morning, we'll have beautiful flowers laid out and the opportunity to make bouquets. There will be vases available, or you can bring your favorite vase. We will have specific ones as it's Trans Day of Visibility. We'll have blue and pink and white and multiple other colors. So you can come and help and we'll fill the space. So this is a way if you want to name this in honor of a loved one and to help support this effort. There's some links available on the avenues and online to do that and help support that and with the music as well. So a quick glance, Holy Week is coming up next Sunday. Palm Sunday, we'll have a procession with palm leaves and bells. And then on that Thursday, it will be Maundy Thursday, we'll gather for dinner church, and it will be a beautiful, simple retelling of the story. All ages are encouraged, beautiful music, and a really simple, light meal of soup and bread. So hope you'll join us at 6 p.m. for dinner church on Maundy Thursday. On Good Friday, the Labyrinth will be open in the gallery, so you can come and go. There'll be opportunities for reflection, but that will be set up all day. You can come and go. And then on Easter morning, we'll gather for those of us who love to be up early, 6:45 here in the garden. It's always a sweet and beautiful space to come together and tell the story and gather in the morning. There'll be breakfast following at 8:30 with an Easter egg roll at 9 o'clock, and then 10 o'clock we'll gather for worship that morning on Easter. So that's just a quick glance of what's coming up next week, starting next Sunday. Hairbrushes. VeggieTales shout out to all you fans out there. So Rare Breed does need hairbrushes, so that's what we're helping to collect this month. You can drop those off in the basket as you come into the gallery. One final note before quilters, we are planning a trip to Nicaragua with the Rainbow Network. If you're interested in learning more about this trip, it'll be the first week of June. We're going to meet next Sunday after church. So anyone that's just curious, that wants to come learn, anybody that's planning to come, hope you'll come. And then if you don't, yes, there's a little bit more information about that. You can see Brad or Neil with more questions about that opportunity. But this is a way we're going to get to connect with a new community. So we'll get to be the ones on the ground. This is not a work trip. This is a go and see experience. So for anybody who's curious about this, there are scholarships available. So again, talk to Neil and Brad or myself, or just come join us next Sunday after church. With that, a moment of cue.
I'm Pastor Jody, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm here to ask for your help as always, but first I want to thank those of you who have already jumped in to help with our production of Quilters coming this July. So many people have already donated and brought things and moved things and helped build things. So want to thank you, but there's much work yet to be done. So first of all, We need a ton of wooden spoons, and by a ton I mean a lot, because some will break, and we're going to turn these into giant needles. And now that we have 6 little extra girls that are going to do Fiona birthday performance with us at the last matinee, we're going to need even more of these wooden needles. So if you would like to buy a few, if you see some, or if you have some, we just need they will be ruined. You can't have them back if it's not a loan. But we need tons and tons of wooden spoons. We still need tons and tons of old-fashioned fabric. This came in, it's great. I think it's going to be a skirt. But just anything you find like that. And then helpers. Connie, did you want to say something about helpers? And I know that all of our other team leads could use some help. The set piece that we're going to be building in the basement, practicing on, and then unbuilding and building back up here in the sanctuary right before the play is already down there. So if you have any building skills, please, for now, I know he doesn't want to be in charge of anything, but let Neil know, and Neil will let me know. That way you don't all have to find me. So I think that's all for today. So let's get ready for our scripture. As always, I'd like to remind you that the Spirit of God is present in the everyday, but the Spirit of God is always so present in this room, in the love that exists in this room, in the respect for one another, in the way we honor and treat one another. So as we prepare to hear the Holy Scripture, let's take a moment to just center ourselves, find a posture that is comfortable, and then just breathe it in. Breathe in the love. Breathe in the Spirit. Breathe in all the care and inspiration, all the things that are present in this room. And then remember that they are also present in our everyday. We turn to the words of the ancients.
From Mark 4:35 through 41 from The Voice. The same evening, Jesus suggested they cross over to the other side of the lake. With Jesus already in the boat, they left the crowd behind and set sail, along with a few other boats that followed. As they sailed, a storm formed. The winds whipped up huge waves that broke over the bow, filling the boat with so much water that even the experienced sailors among them were sure they were going to sink. Jesus was back in the stern of the boat, sound asleep on a cushion, when the disciples shook him awake. Disciples shouting over the storm, "Jesus, Master, don't you care that we're going to die?" He got up, shouted words into the wind, and commanded the waves. Jesus said, "That's enough. Be still." And immediately the wind died down to nothing, and the waves stopped. Jesus said, "How can you be so afraid? After all that you've seen, where is your faith?" The disciples were still afraid, slowly coming to grips with what they had seen. Disciples said to one another, "Who is this Jesus? How can it be that he has power over even the wind and the waves?"
Mark chapter 6, verse 45 through 52. As soon as the meal was finished, Jesus insisted that the disciples get in the boat and go on ahead across to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the congregation. After sending them off, he climbed a mountain to pray. Late at night, the boat was far out at sea. Jesus was still by himself on the land. He could see his men struggling with the oars, the wind having come up against them. At about 4 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the sea. He intended to go right by them, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and screamed, scared to death. Jesus was quick to confront them. "Courage, it's me. Don't be afraid." As soon as he climbed into the boat, the wind died down. They were stunned, shaking their heads, wondering what was going on. They didn't understand what he had done at the supper. None of this had penetrated their hearts.
From Mark chapter 6, verses 30 through 44 in the New Revised Standard Version. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away so that they may go to the surrounding country and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves have you? Go and see." When they had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and groups of 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to the heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men.
Mark chapter 5, verse 21 through 43. Jesus crossed the lake again, and on the other side a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Jairus, one of the synagogue leaders, came forward. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet and pleaded with him, "My daughter is about to die. Please come and place your hands on her so that she may be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A swarm of people were following Jesus, crowding in on him. A woman was there who had been bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a lot under the care of many doctors and spent everything she had without getting any better. In fact, she had gotten worse. Because she had heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his clothes. She was thinking, "If I can just touch his clothes, I'll be healed." Her bleeding stopped immediately, and she sensed in her body that her illness had been healed. At that very moment, Jesus recognized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" His disciples said to him, "Don't you see the crowd pressing against you? Yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus looked around carefully to see who had done it. The woman, full of fear and trembling, came forward. Knowing what had happened to her, she fell down in front of Jesus and told him the whole truth. He responded, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace, healed from your disease." While Jesus was still speaking with her, messengers came from the synagogue leader's house, saying to Jairus, "Your daughter has died. Why bother the teacher any longer?" Jesus overheard their report and said to the synagogue leader, "Don't be afraid. Just keep trusting." He didn't allow anyone to follow him except Peter, James, and John, James's brother. When they came to the synagogue leader's house, he saw a commotion, with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "What is all this commotion and crying about? The child isn't dead. She's only sleeping." They laughed at him, but he threw them all out. Then, taking the child's parents and his disciples with him, he went into the room where the child was. Taking her hand, he said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Young woman, get up." Suddenly the young woman got up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. They were shocked. He gave them strict orders that no one should know what had happened. Then he told them to give her something to eat. a reading to ground us in our tradition. Apart from our traditions as co-creators.
Please join me in this Lenten prayer. And as we start with a moment of silence, I'd like to suggest that you consider the miracle of spring. Plant in me, O God, your visions of restoration. I long to be a field where all your hopes blossom. Make my heart a place of refuge for every shattered dream of peace. Let my imagination run wild as dreams of justice are birthed from within. I don't want to waste this life shackled by despair, confined by fear, a stranger to the miracle of just being alive. I want to be fully awake to all the beauty that surrounds. I want to be determined in hope and relentless pursuer of what could be. I want to be a messenger of belonging to every soul that weighs heavy under narratives of bigotry or hate. I have known what it is to be a stranger to joy. But this ancient story of love sustaining generation after generation in labors of liberation, it frees me from my fear. No longer will I view life on evil's terms. No longer will I forget. No longer will I submit to rules of dominance. But in the freedom of Christ, you make my spirit rise.
Thank you, choir and Kirsten. That was beautiful. Beautiful. Over the past several weeks, we have been walking this Lenten journey with Bishop Shelby Spong. In Unbelievable, he outlines 12 theses inviting us to move to a living faith that can stand at the intersections of the best of what we know of the world around us. Over the past hundreds of years, there have been incredible evolutions in how we see and how we hold and understand the world, from Isaac Newton to Charles Darwin to Marie Curie, just to name a few, who have helped us evolve how we see and know and relate to the world around us. So today we're invited to pause and consider, what do we do with miracles? I think the choir really helped us with that one. That was real good. When we look at the Bible, we see miracle stories are told around a few key figures in the Bible. They have a specific purpose for driving a story. It's important to note that almost every religious tradition has tales about supernatural powers that move from a human and come to make God accessible in some form and fashion. They're part of the lore, handed down orally, stories that are told to help to make sense of the world around them. It took a while for these miracle stories to appear in written form. We notice in the Hebrew biblical tradition, as Spong offers, miracles are generally limited to the narratives that have gathered around a couple of gigantic Hebrew heroes. Moses, you've probably heard of that figure, the father of the law, and Elijah, the father of the prophets. And then their successors, Joseph in Moses' case, and Elisha in the case of Elijah. So Moses and Joshua are told, and the stories are woven with them, of natural miracles. Burning bushes, plagues, you remember the story, the parting of the Red Sea. Spong points out, miracles entered the biblical story in service of tribal needs, to validate the quest for the Hebrew freedom story, to deliver the people from the perils of life. Miracles were to create suffering for the enemy. These were stories told by marginalized people who desperately sought to be relieved of oppressive situations. They were ultimately led out of horrific circumstances and come together to share the Passover moment, and then led out into the wilderness beyond life they had known. Is the point of the stories that the miracles were true, or do these stories mean even something more? The miracle stories pick back up in the Hebrew Bible with Elijah in the prophetic movement. Elijah is able to provide food like Moses and deal with the natural events. Elijah is the first biblical character to raise someone from the dead, and then Elisha being next. These characters grow beyond the story of Moses and Joseph and include a story of ascension. If you want all the details, Spong will outline all of it for you. May not be yours to read, or you can go back and read the tales. But it's interesting when you compare these heroic stories and figures, you begin to see the patterns, how they build on each other, how these figures and stories responded to the needs of the community, those in trying and difficult situation. Each community told stories in their context to reveal a way they understood God working in their midst. We jump ahead. The next time that we see miracle stories really showing up again is in the stories of Jesus, one who was known as healer, organizer, change maker, and savior. Jesus is associated with the three different types of miracle stories: the nature miracle stories, the raising of the dead miracle stories, and the healing miracle stories. Many of the same concepts that we saw in the early texts in the Hebrew Bible, only the stories grow and they get even bigger in these tales. I want to point out a couple things that Spong notes about what happens with the miracle stories with Jesus. He points out that the author of John's Gospel does not call the acts miracles. He calls them signs, that what people experienced in Jesus were signs. Also important to note that the stories of signs, which are doing something a little different in that gospel, come later. We see the stories in Mark's gospel actually show up 40 years later after Jesus' death. One other thing to note, Paul, who wrote a lot of the letters to the church, never mentions a miracle being connected with Jesus in the entire body of his authentic epistles. So a couple things for us to hold. We heard beautifully read, thank you, several of the tales of Jesus' miracle accounts that fall into the nature, miracles, raising the dead, and healing story. We heard a few of those this morning. We know that there are many other stories. These are beloved stories. Stories that have meaning and value in our lives. Stories that have shaped Christians and Christianity for hundreds of years. But I wonder, how do we read these stories? What do we do with these stories? Do we have to understand these stories to be true, in the way we often define things as true, for them to have meaning? As I thought about these questions, I realized I needed help. Those are big questions. So I called on someone who knows how to read literature and stories. She spent her career writing and helping to educate others and talk about great literature and stories. More than that, she's a wonderful storyteller, and she's graciously offered to tell us a story from her own life. Etta Madden, thank you so much for offering your story and your insight as we figure out what to do with miracles.
Thank you, Pastor Jenn. You said more about me than I expected, but if you heard, she used the pronouns her to refer to me, so I do prefer she and hers. And she also mentioned that I have spent many years teaching at Missouri State. Those of you that don't know me very well may not know that it's been 3 semesters since I've had captive students in the classroom for 50 minutes or 90 minutes or sometimes for almost 3 hours. So I'll do the best I can this morning with a little bit of time that I have to share with you. I also want to say that when Pastor Jenn asked me to share some thoughts about Spong's book, Unbelievable, I immediately said, absolutely, I loved reading that book. It synthesized for me little bits that I picked up in my undergraduate studies, bits of knowledge that I picked up from our former Reverend Dr. Ray, who was pastor here for many years, and from our congregant, Dr. John White, and his colleagues in the Jesus Seminar. Spong's book brought those all together for me. But then, as today approached, and I began to think about Easter miracles and the resurrection, I kind of got nervous because there's nothing more anxiety-producing for someone with a PhD who was once pre-med and studied biology to think about things like life out of death and the virgin birth. That might be even harder to talk about. But as I chatted with Pastor Jenn, she said, the resurrection's coming later. Don't worry, you don't have to talk about that. Whew. I thought, great. And she asked me to talk about something personal. And so I'm going to do that today. I've set aside Mark's miracles that you heard Lancasters read, and I'm going to focus on something really relevant for today, and that is miracles of St. Patrick. So I'm wearing my green. In my Scotch-Irish, mostly Irish household growing up, we wore green on March 17th, and I carry on that tradition. My mother and father didn't insist on it. It was instead a habit that you just did. It was almost as though it was inborn and genetic. My mother simmered corned beef, cabbage, potatoes on the stove, and we all 8 of us in the household, ate them with vigor. My dad said it was the day to plant potatoes, and he shared the miraculous story of St. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland. He didn't give us any other details about this 5th century saint. He was Protestant, as my family was, not Roman Catholic, even though the number of children in our household made people suspect that we were Roman Catholic. My father also didn't tell us about St. Patrick converting himself to this new religion of the Roman Empire, or that he converted the others of the Celtic tradition to Christianity and the new doctrine of the Trinity. Instead, my dad, a smart, rational man of few words, shared St. Patrick's feat as though it were fact and just went on about his business of eating the corned beef and cabbage and wearing green. He shared it as though it were fact, just as he shared that my mother's families, the Maddens and his family, the Maddens, and my mother's family, the Grady's, left Ireland during the 19th century potato famine. He also shared that my mother's family, the Grady's, were absolutely full of blarney. I never questioned any of these words that my father shared. Later, I would question the comments that he made to me about the proper length of my skirt or who I should or shouldn't date, but I accepted the Irish stories. They were cultural traditions, part of the way that my family made meaning of our Irish heritage. As Spong says, and you've already read once this morning, miracles are never viable explanations of what actually happened. Instead, the stories of miracles live on in their cultures in the service of tribal needs to validate people, such as the Irish becoming Christians. Now, my comments on St. Patrick and his miracles and personal experience don't end here. For me, the saint's holiday has grown even more through the years, validating me and my family. At this point, I'm not thinking about my Irish parents and my siblings, but my husband and my sons. Our existence as a small family touches on this holiday. Almost 40 years ago, Neil reminded me this morning it was 39 years ago, also a Sunday that year, a young grad student was headed back to campus at the end of spring break. She had just introduced her Arkansas Irish family to a tall, lean law student with laughing brown eyes, thick, brown, curly hair, and beard. This brilliant, non-Irish boyfriend from New England rode next to her in the passenger seat of his preciously rebuilt Maverick with a heavy front end and a V8 engine. He trusted her enough to drive his car the last stretch of their long journey from Little Rock back to Charlottesville, Virginia. To this young couple's surprise, just before midnight on St. Patrick's Day, only 20 miles from their destination, a driver who'd had one too many St. Patty's drinks entered the interstate exit ramp. That is, he was going the wrong direction on a divided highway at high speed and with no lights on. His Jeep slammed head-on into the front of the Maverick, climbed up onto its hood, pinned the Maverick's steering wheel to the female driver's chest, and threw her boyfriend against the dash and window before airbags and before both cars stopped. Now, I shake as I tell that story because it's still very real for me. The rest of the story, many people have said, was a miracle. Neil has no memory of it. I was alert enough as the rescue workers using the jaws of life pulled me out of the driver's seat to give our names, our birth dates, our parents' names, and their phone numbers, and to ask, really to beg, please don't call anyone until the morning. I don't want anybody frightened by the news of our accident. After all, we're fine. So I thought. But we weren't fine. And the hospital workers did call our families as soon as they were able. It was only days and weeks later, after ICU and surgeries and during a long recovery, that I learned what a St. Patrick's Day miracle it really was, that Neil and I were alive. It struck him when he went to the junkyard to search out belongings that might still be in his totaled car. He was mourning the Maverick. I was mourning my poor little knitting project, and I hoped he'd find it. Our priorities were a little wacky. But while he was at the junkyard owner pointed out several crashed cars, all totaled like the Maverick, barely recognizable by make and model, usually only a bit by color. Those drivers, the junkyard owner said, shaking his head, those owners didn't make it out alive. Is it the luck of the Irish that I and my husband Neil lived to tell this story? Was it God's will? Was it a miracle? What would Spong say? Well, since I reread Spong's chapter on miracles to prepare for these words this morning, I will say this. He would say, in John's gospel, such events are never called miracles. They're called signs. We are the ones who read and interpret them. We are the ones who give meaning to the stories. My two adult sons and my husband, I think, would confirm they have heard me tell the car crash story perhaps more frequently than they've heard about St. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland. In our household, this St. Patrick's Day story has been told and retold at some point every year on the 17th, and often it's been at the end of spring break travels. This story, as Spong reminds us of the biblical miracles, is not so much about what actually happened. Instead, it's about the power that the story has accrued through our retelling of it. For me, this St. Patrick's story is part of the myth of my long relationship with Neil. Since those challenges in 1985, the car crash and what it presented, we've faced many other challenges, as everyone does as they go through life. Anyone who's been married more than a day or a few decades knows we're the ones who choose to believe in the relationships and their meanings. We're the ones who make and remake our so-called destiny and the magic, supposed magic, of its endurance. As Spong says of the miracles of Christianity, we should learn to view them in a radically different way. The purpose is not to destroy their power. Instead, it's to realize their richness. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Susan Mihalevich. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm here today to talk about the unit trust. And I think following Etta Madden is really a hard act. I basically am shy and I'm not a public speaker. She was so fabulous, but anyway, I'll make it quick, that's all I can say. I'm thrilled today to announce the receipt of the annual disbursements from the Unitrust funds. There are 3 funds. The Memorial Fund will receive $29,279. The Outreach will receive $42,219, and the Property Fund $19,651, for a grand total of $91,150. Now that's a lot of money, I think, by anybody's standards. So along with the pledges that we receive and the Unitrust funds, these 2 funds are essential for the sustainability of this church. Many of you may be wondering what the Unitrust is. I know for years it was a mystery to me. But the Unitrust basically is just an endowment fund created years ago by members of our congregation to establish funds to promote the general ministry, stewardship, and missions for National Avenue Christian Church. This is in addition to the yearly pledges. Besides myself, there are 4 members who serve as trustees. Some of them are here today. Lisa Westland, Lisa Crump, Brian Paul, and Mark Biggs and myself serve currently. In the audience, I see Bill Woody, who has been on it so many times, and Neil Guyan, who rewrote the indenture. Carrie, I don't know if Carrie White's here, but he was also on it a long time. So we really thank all these people for their service. We are the connection to the Christian Church Foundation where the monies are managed. I feel we're in very good hands with the Christian Church Foundation, which serves many disciples' congregations. 12 years ago, we moved our monies to them, and we started at that point with $1,452,500. During the years, these 12 years, we have withdrawn over $1 million for our disbursements, which now leaves us with a current balance as of January 1st, 24, of $1,807,069. So we have maintained and added to our corpus. The Christian Church Foundation has many safeguards and has proven to be a trustworthy, transparent, accessible, and also has a low expense ratio, which has created this quality performance. This year, we have it in 2 funds. All the monies are in 2 funds, and one fund was 14% growth, the other was 15%. Now this was a great year for the stock market, and we certainly won't always have that, but this was a great year, and it's reflected in that total. Once a year, we have a disbursement based on a percentage determined by the trustees, which was 5% this year, which is the maximum. These withdrawals go into 3 trusts: the Memorial Fund, the Outreach Foundation, and the Property Foundation. As stated in the indenture, which is our governing body of the Unitrust, the purpose of the Memorial Fund is to provide funds to continue the general ministry of the church. The purpose of Outreach is to provide funds to further outreach, and the purpose of Property is to provide funds for the preservation and maintenance of the building and grounds. Requests for funds come from the Memorial Fund. They come from Spirituality and Community Collaboratives. Requests from Outreach come from the Justice Collaborative, and the requests from the Property Fund come from the Property Committee. These are all presented to the Board of Directors and approved. It is important to understand that these funds do not replace the annual giving that we still need to fund our ongoing operations, but provide additional means to fulfill our mission. I thought I'd go over some of the ways that these funds were used last year. These are just a few of them. Last year, the Memorial Funds were used for music, which we have to agree is our music is so fabulous, and it's been so wonderful today. We have an upcoming visit by Diana Butler Ross, which we are sponsoring. We have Bethany Fellow Scholarships, which is just to name a few things. For outreach funds, the funds went to the Ashbury Cold Weather Shelter, the Glow Center, the Black Tie Event, Ecclesia, NAACP, Connecting Grounds, and the Rainbow Network. And finally, Property, which kind of had a hard year, had a pump repair and a new chiller and some funds for the playground remodel. This was a total of $110,388 that was used from the Unitrust money to do these things, which is really a lot of money too. This money is available to us because of the generosity of many of our members and former members who had the vision to begin the fund and to make contributions. We all thank you, donors, and I see some of them in the crowd. We thank you for your support and helping us maintain these funds. Last summer, Kirby Gould from the Christian Church Foundation came and spoke to us and provided a seminar on planned giving. I do have some information if anyone's interested in giving to the unit trust or to the church directly. I'd be happy to talk to you. Last year, I mentioned that we received a sizable legacy gift from Jeannie Gamble, and we talked about how much, all her stories and how much she loved the church. But that went in last year, but that was a good example of what we all could be doing. In closing, let us celebrate the privilege we have to belong to and serve such a fantastic church. As our mission states, we are open, inclusive, a progressive community of faith with a heart for social justice. As I sit in this beautiful sanctuary, I feel the presence of God in this holy place, and I leave with hope, peace, and a commitment to doing my part. The offering will now be given and received.
As the
you at this moment to say thank you for present-day miracles, the miracle of spring, the miracle of beautiful music, the miracle of Nora, the miracle of the other children and their voices as we celebrate and worship together. But at this moment, most of all, we say thank you as the teachings of Jesus become a part of our heart, and we learn through that to experience the joy of giving, and that it truly is more blessed to give than receive. Amen.
2 months after departing from Egypt, led by Moses, the Hebrews began to find the realities of nomadic wilderness living oppressive. Food was scarce, and they began to express resentment. At least as slaves in Egypt, there had been food to eat, they said. You brought us into this wilderness to die of hunger. They missed the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and garlic that they had had in Egypt. Moses takes this complaint to God, who is said to have responded with the promise to rain bread down from heaven. Similarly, our tradition tells a story of the miracles of Jesus, that he multiplied a handful of fish and some loaves of bread to feed thousands, changed water into wine to keep the wedding feast hopping. But the story from Jesus' life that we have for centuries gathered and replayed and retold is not a story of a miracle, but a simple meal. Jesus gathered with his closest comrades, his family, and shared food and drink, and what would prove to be his Last Supper. Maybe he felt the weight of that dinner. Maybe he felt it in his gut. Perhaps he knew his time was short. Perhaps he hoped the connection they shared at that meal would carry them through the hard hours and days to come. We don't reenact the miracles. We come together
like they did. In the most ordinary of human activities, around a table with food and drink. Look at us, God. Our hands are empty, our hearts are hungry, and we realize we are hungry for you, God our Maker. We are hungry for a world where people are loved and affirmed. We are hungry for the Spirit. We are hungry for justice. We are hungry for community. We are hungry for celebration. We are hungry for Jesus the Christ. We are hungry for change. God of life, today we remember that you are hungry too. Jesus, gathered around tables wondering how to change and shift unjust systems. This way was radical. It pursued a great hope that we could live compassion for all people. In our hearts, we celebrate your life and death and life from death, and we proclaim this bread will be for us your life, this cup will be for us your hope. So we do now what you did at that last feast. On the night you were betrayed, gathered with your friends and disciples, around a table, you took bread and wine. You said they were your life poured out, a new relationship that for it all that is.
Let us pray. Generous and tender God, may our time at the table lead us towards durable connections with each other. Simple time, present time, hopeful time is nothing short of miraculous. Loosen the strings of expectation that vulnerability may flow between us. Fortify us for the practice and patience required to build new worlds. Surprise us with delight along the way. May this bread and cup sustain us. Amen.
Thank you, as always, to those who helped to make this space possible, bring it to life, from those up in the tech booth who helped to run the things behind the scenes, those who are with us online, to the beautiful music. Kirsten, again, thank you. To our choir, thank you for your work. To the deacons and elders and worship leaders who hold this space, and a special thank you this morning to Etta for sharing your story and helping us as we hold this space. Appreciate you very much. Thank you again to each of you for your presence, for being here, for listening, for opening. Encourage you that there are treats and hot chocolate. No, hot tea is what I was trying to say. Maybe there's hot chocolate. There's a lot of things in the kitchen. I know there's coffee. There is the miracle of coffee here with us this morning, which I might need a little more. Hope you will join us after and linger in the gallery as we share in this time. But as we prepare to leave, let us stand and join our voices as we sing "Fill the World with Love." May the road rise to meet you.
May the wind be always at your back,
May the sun shine upon your face.
and rains fall soft upon your fields.
And until we meet again,
May God hold you in the hollow of their hand.
may it be so. I know.